Hello, I am Professor Linda Keane, AIA of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, partner in Studio 1032, Architecture and Environmental Design. I work on green initiatives along the Milwaukee-Chicago corridor. Co-founder of the NEXUS informal e-learning Designopedia, I introduce what design is, what it does, and why it is important across 9 connected scales, working with college students and K-12 classrooms. I am pleased to speak about the Water, Energy, Food Nexus as a Skype participant at Critical Practice in an Age of Complexity. I will share the combination of collegiate activity in the city of Chicago on the water, food, energy nexus, and then how it is translated into a workshop with 6th grade Chicago Public School girls. Water is essential for life. A healthy water source is necessary for healthy living. Looking at issues has critically changed from singular to 9 connected scales, integrating seeing, looking, contemplating, learning, and responding of everything human. You may be familiar with these 2 designers, Ray and Charles Eames, from last century, looking at the world as imagined through Einstein's theory of relativity, to everything large, to quantum physics, looking at the world that was invisible to the naked eye as incredibly minute in nanoscale. This is a geologist's look at Manhattan as Peter Stuyvesant would see it coming up the Hudson, and then it is involved in all of its biodiversity of topography, soil, flora, fauna, insects, animals, roads, and buildings, culture, technology, and the economy, from 1650s to now. Universal scale compares and contrasts mathematically the relationship of things that we know. A critical practice today stretches our imagination backwards and forwards simultaneously in time, space, scale, and place relevancy in the impact on local atmosphere, biosphere, lithosphere, and hydrosphere. The water, energy, food nexus is an integrated look at the necessity of combining vision, governance, knowledge capacity, and planning tools to respond to massive globalization. Eco-Design RIVERWORKS Chicago is an interactive transient sound mapping and community engagement series of classes that reimagines and visualizes the sustainable world above and beneath the surface of the Chicago River. Post-industrial cities like Chicago are challenging engagement with their water sources, water habitats, water conservation, water quality, and college and art and design students can activate new connections with the public. Most people don't really think of their cities or urban areas as cities that begin by sources of water. Chicago, like many cities, began on the river in the 1700s on the right, with areas of wetland, many lakes and rivers, timber, and you can see on the left in 1900, when the river, the natural flow of the river was reversed down the North Branch and the North Channel out into Lake Michigan, it was reversed backwards to take all the polluted water that the city was contributing to the river and pass it down the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal to the Des Plaines River, the Mississippi, and then the Gulf of Mexico. Today you can see that this natural topography in the flora and fauna has been dramatically reduced and removed, leaving a river that needs to reclaim itself as a working, environmental, and recreationally healthy river. Water is essential to life, yet we are predicting that 40% shortfall in water supplies by 2030 will be due to urbanization, pressures of food production, and increasing demand from manufacturing, domestic, and energy sectors. In college classes, students look at creating a water workbook that will share this system's connectivity across water, water use, water infrastructure. Surprisingly, both college students and K-12 students don't really know where in the world our water sources are to find fresh drinking water. 97% of the world's water is salty. The other 3% is fresh water, and it is the rivers, lakes, and underground aquifers that provide us with fresh water. We are beginning to look at these sources as not just beautiful water that the city is placed on, but actually looking at how we use it in our daily lives and begin to respect that relationship. Amazingly, students are surprised to find that the Great Lakes provide 90% of the freshwater resource for the United States and 20% for the world. So you see that actually the hydrosphere and the atmosphere systems are not really replenishing themselves in urban conditions. They begin to also look at the impact of human habitation along the Great Lakes and to realize how many years it will take to remediate the pollutants. They begin to become aware of human impact on water shortages and begin to look at rivers as capillaries of healthy living. River pollution happens all over the world. Part of it is from industry, part of it is from careless people and the trash we accumulate. But these rivers are, in fact, our life source. So in A Walk to the River with New Eyes and New Thoughts, they stop and look as architects and designers at the structures up and down the river. They walk along the newly completed River Walk by Carol Ross Barney and look at the interactions of the people and the material and riverine edges and how they are being constructed. They walk along the marina, the amphitheater, the splash pad, and the jetty with fish hotels and phytoremediation. They use inexpensive, everyday tools to echo-sense the river. Echo-sensing and sound mapping is a new method of bringing what is invisible into the visible cognition of people, policies, governments, and how we live together in dense areas. They begin to look at a series of data that will begin to inform what is actually going on between the 4 different spheres. With the help from the Friends of the Chicago River, they do water testing. It's actually very clear at this point because it's coming straight in. This is at the Michigan Avenue Bridge. It's coming straight in from Lake Michigan. But then they go and use Stroud's Institute Citizen Scientist Wiki Watershed to actually see where the watersheds are, what water is filtering right back into the river or into the lake, and then where the river is going down into the other areas. With the Wiki Watershed, they can actually model and look at areas. They can look at how much is evaporated into the atmosphere, how much runs off straight pollution into the river, and then how much infiltrates. So they're actually looking at the lithosphere, the biosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere together. They can also then model if they change some of the density to porous development so that it was either low, medium, high, or actually reforested. It actually has wetland, and they can look at the health of the hydrologic soil groups for infiltration. Now, surprisingly enough, they can map the surface of our buildings as a new surface area for porosity, as the City of Chicago Green roof improves air quality, offsets cooling cost, provides wildlife habitat, and makes the city more breathable and beautiful. Drawing from the City of Chicago data of buildings by EnviroScore, or energy use, and updated Energy Star air quality, they can see which buildings are beginning to use less energy, and they begin to look to see which buildings are using low flush or on-demand hot water heating systems. They take this notion of biodiversity of energy use, and they look at the Atlas of Reurbanization for the biodiversity of building age and type as important to the biodiversity of a biome. If we tear down our city's aging infrastructure and replace it all with new, is that diverse enough? Does it allow for a biodiversity of mixed income, mixed opportunities in our urban areas? They also compare the walkability score and see how it invites pedestrian mobility and provides destinations to seek out the water sources. They learn about the biodiversity of life above and below the surface of the Chicago River and in the Great Lakes. They learn about invasive and native species and create projects that can share these with the public of different ages. They also then bring the idea of microorganisms as critical as the base foundation for the life cycle, and then begin to look at the dispersion, or actually the depletion, of this phytoplankton and zooplankton in their own lake because of the invasive first Michigan zebra mussels and then the quagga mussels that can eat everything in a cup of lake water in about 3 hours to crystalline. They also then apply this to the food market that is showing that not only the overfishing, the increase in fishing, but then also the reduction of phytoplankton and zooplankton, even in our oceans, and has reduced the number of fish available. And as you know, they are ordained to be extinct very shortly. So this is where we shift into eco-design river listening and what makes a soundscape on these different spheres. This work is inspired by Dr. Leah Barkley, UNESCO Biosphere Reserves Listener and River Listener, and also Eric Leonardson, head of the Midwest Acoustic Ecology, who assisted the students in building hydrophones. Listening is a spatial experience. One can begin to understand the role that water brings to communities all over the world. Here we see it as an example of pleasure, of gathering, of coming together, whereas in many parts of the world, it is primary to existence. The students then create a Chicago RIVERWORKS fountain map where they actually visit the fountains, they study their history, they write a blog, they make a map where people can begin to plot a destination of walking from water source to the lakefront or to the river's edge. In addition, working with Eric Leonardson, they contribute to the Apparay sound map, which is all over the world. beginning to connect people to the importance of a sound environment and respite places of sound and natural sounds in the urban condition. So here the students are making their hydrophones, and they are then covered so that they can go below the water. And they were very excited to hear their first fish. That was it. So it's interesting, that was in the Chicago River. Here you'll see them. So these are parts of life in the city that are invisible. So the main goals of this class were to produce a sound map collecting data, but also to make it an environmental map to develop the script for an eco boat tour. Currently, the city has 15 companies that give 4 to 6 tours a day from April through October on the history of the architecture. And we are asking the city to create an ecological boat tour that talks about the importance of water conservation and the water, energy, food nexus. And so we invite you to enjoy these maps and see if there are ways that you may begin to parallel this course of study. The next part shifts to, now that they have learned this, how can they share the idea that of all of the fresh water, 70% is given to industrialized agriculture. Only 8% is really in our household or domestic use, cleaning, washing, food preparation, drinking, and 22% is industrial. So water has many issues because as the water is, we used to think water it is a finite system, but what is happening if we take it from one place and move it to another, it actually destroys the ecosystems. And then in transporting the water, it's in aging infrastructure. As we know, there is lead in many of our urban pipe systems. And the other thing that most people don't understand is that in the last 15 or 20 years, water, which as Oxfam declares is a human right for everyone on earth, is now a commodity. It is now being bought and sold. And then access to water is now becoming more for those who can pay. So water issues. The food production pollutes our water with chemical fertilizations. The gas emissions affect quality of air and affect the atmosphere. Electricity fired by natural gas, actually then the pipes are leaking. Many of the pipes are beyond their life as they move from natural gas from, in our country, Canada, all the way maybe to Wisconsin. There are many leaks along the way that affect the groundwater, which is the community's water drinking source. Wetlands are now the environmental protection is being lifted on them, and they are being developed. Without these natural filters, the water, groundwater is polluted. Cities are actually sinking into the ground under emptied aquifers, and as we know, climate change is flooding our coastlines. So a good movie to watch is Blue Gold, The World Water Wars, and that will explain some of the relationships that are going on that are invisible to many citizens and that need to be addressed. Next is food. Food is for everyone, but we also in our urban areas have food deserts where it's lack of access to healthy food sources. On the other hand, the United States creates much more food than it needs, and our average caloric intake is above 2,200 per individual. We're finding as prosperity comes to the rest of the world, China, which used to have about 1,200 calories per day, is now also coming up to 2,000. So more food needs to be produced for more people. One of the largest percentage of carbon footprints of cities is food importation. Now, importing this food, we used to grow the food. In the 1950s, people were still, and cities were still basically agrarian. But as the industry changed to manufacturing and now service industry, food is farmed out. Food production is farmed out, and cities are no longer self-sufficient, and food security is a threat. A great movie is Eat Real, Eat Local Canada, that really talks about the impact of what a meal is used to be locally produced in Canada and now travels all these different miles through a different series of planes, trains, refrigerated automobiles. All of this started after 1950 with the refrigeration of train cars and then of trucks. But this importation of food then also has an impact on the landscape and the groundwater and the hydrosphere and atmosphere and lithosphere of where we are living. It actually then depletes land that could be used for farming with suburban sprawl and with urban densification. And then there's energy. We have aging infrastructure, aging power grids, non-renewable versus renewable, and global carbon emission. These ideas need to be shared not only at our government level, at our corporate level, with our college students, but also in K-12. And that is where the work of citizens as social activists come in, and students as social activists. So a critical practice is we can learn these things for ourselves, for our own preparation into careers, but we need to introduce these tools, language, discovery, and design opportunities to the general public, particularly the 99% that doesn't go to college, or in our country, the 36% or 2/3 that do not go as well, because we are the caretakers and the steward of our environment. So here is a 90-minute workshop where we have students that took the eco design class who helped develop these journeys and then shared them with 6th grade public school children.
In Chicago in 1911, 8th grade public school students were given a copy of the Wacker Manual, an urban primer for municipal economies. Like the Wacker Manual sharing of great designers of great cities, today's primer introduces sustainable systems as ways to connect the ecology of place with people. In 2016, students are given access to NEXUS' Designopedia to imagine cities of the future. Girls think about balancing a compass with nature, well-being, economy, and society. As global populations seek new opportunities in urban areas, girls think about making cities that work like nature, with living systems like the ones that work in their bodies. Girls are charged with providing clean water, local food, and renewable energy and creation of walkable, mixed-use, mixed-income, place-based neighborhoods. Girls form teams and select a site to begin building, beside rivers surrounded by wetlands, woodlands, and prairies. They place single-family farmhouses using NEXUS' Green Home Journey. They create farm communities powered by alternative energy sources. Girls choose leadership roles and travel to meet with career mentors to prepare their cities. Mayors talk about responsibilities: listening, thinking, writing, speaking, collaborating, and leading. They learn about their envisioning and governing a city. Mayors choose buildings with iconic identities. Health and well-being leaders provide clean water, local food, and walkable neighborhoods. Civil engineers build main streets and connect walking paths, bikes, buses, cars, trucks, water taxis, and airplanes. They incorporate renewable energy sources to power their cities. Housing directors select different housing styles and types to establish and diversify neighborhoods. developers create commercial corridors where people can purchase the supplies, services, and systems they need to live, work, learn, and play. Girls place varied green spaces as public plazas, parks, playgrounds, recreation areas, and open lands. Education directors place learning environments for all ages with nature play areas throughout the city. Developers select and place business workspaces and innovation centers. Learning from mentors, girls work together. They collaborate, negotiate, and consider alternative ways of living, while thinking how they will contribute to make their city better. Girls design ecopolises.
Another thing that's special is it has lots of transportation, like the airport, the tunnel where the ships and boats go, and there is a train station. What is also unique about our city is that we have 2 rivers, we have many buildings. What's special about our town is number 1 that we all work together and we all built this town, and number 2 is our library and our education parts of the town, the city.
So thank you very much for this opportunity to share this. Capacity building and social learning opens the increasing complexity of cross-sectorial approaches. It raises awareness of the necessity of social justice for all among the NEXUS sectors and actives and urban development. Awareness raising promotes sustainable lifestyles and affects consumption patterns. I want to thank Stockholm 2011, the Water, Energy, Food Nexus, and also Herbert Giraudet for his book, Regenerative Cities, and also Dr. Leah Barkley and Eric Leonardson, who were inspiring to begin a different way of studying the city. Thank you for this opportunity to share this approach to a critical practice in our age of complexity.